Welcome to Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. I'm your host, Ben Dietz.
And I'm your host, Kyle Raymond Fitzpatrick. Every week we get together and talk with guests from Gen Z and beyond to try and understand just exactly what's going on in the current moment.
It's because we're talking about these generations. Welcome to Hip Replacement. This is episode number 1. We're here with Chloe and Claire, the Selleb sisters, and I'm, of course, joined by my co-host, Kyle Fitzpatrick. I'm Ben Dietz, and what we're trying to do in this conversation is have a discussion that helps bridge the gap between generations X, Y, and Z, typically, so I don't feel so old and uncool all the time. And when Kyle and I were talking about people that we wanted to have on the pod in the first place, the Selleb sisters came first to mind for a few reasons. One, I had just met Chloe and Claire at a Substack bestsellers event. 2, because Kyle has actually participated in their signature exposition of people they think are interesting, which I'll have them tell about in a second. And then thirdly, because I think they just represent a really interesting new vector in the way consumption and media come together to create a new format and potentially a new way of doing business. So, Chloe, Claire, Kyle, hi guys.
Hey, we're happy to be here as number 1 guest.
Always, forever in our hearts.
Forever number 1.
You all are helping to kick things off. We're going to have a lot of fun. Couldn't imagine a better duo to have it with. Really just, yeah.
Can you very briefly, like your elevator pitch, as us old people would say, what's the way that you describe Selleb or the mission?
It's always so funny because no one knows who to take it. It's like we're gonna say the exact same thing, but Chloe typically takes the lead, so I was waiting. But I can do it. I can do it this time.
Go for it,
Claire. You do it. Do it.
Okay, so how we describe Selleb is a social app where you can see what the coolest people on the internet are actually buying through their purchase receipts. And what that means is when you're scrolling through, it's kind of like Venmo meets Instagram, but what you're seeing are posts that are coming directly from receipts that are submitted from them with a photo of the item, title, price, and a review if they choose to upload that.
Got it. And so when we
done.
saw each other, I said it was a little bit like Expensify, except applied to your social graph, and you're not getting the money back from the company.
That is so corporate of you to say that.
I'm the old guy on the pod.
That what you just proved that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Expensify is amazing, though, I will say. So I'm happy to be kind of compared to that.
But the thing that I love about it is that it is about like creating a level of transparency in a social universe that has incentivized, let's call it creative storytelling at best, right? And at worst, FOMO or a sense of inequality or whatever the case is. How much of the drive behind it was about like trying to start something that seemed more egalitarian?
I think it's definitely 2-pronged because one side of it is the transparency and authenticity around products that people are actually buying. And it definitely stemmed from our own experiences of being in high school. We used to do fashion blogging and our entire dorm rooms were sponsored. Like we never paid for a single thing. Everything that we posted on our blogs were like, oh, free this, free that. Like, here's the discount code. And I don't know, like a lot of it was like, okay, like, would we actually buy these items with our own money? And the answer 9 times out of 10 was no. And I think a lot of, just the evolution of the creator economy and like how people are promoting products, it's a lot of just like, okay, selling you this, selling you that. Some of them are great ideas, but other times it's like, okay, they're obviously getting it for free and it is just SpawnCon. And so we're like, okay, how can we tackle that side of things, but then also create a place where it's like users don't actually have to do work. Like all they have to do is submit the receipt. We, have built our own system where we use machine learning to turn receipts into actual content. So the only thing you actually have to do is forward that receipt or share that. And if you want to add a photo, if you want to add a review, there is that agency around it. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. And so I think the beauty of our product is really, one, everything is backed by proof of purchase, but then it's also an easy way for people to share and connect through taste.
What? I was going to say really quickly that like I what I enjoy about it and to the point of like, creator consumerism enabled or, representative, whatever, is that like sorry to PR people, but it very authentically is like, this is what people are actually like spending their money on. And a lot of people don't have a lot of money to do these things. So this is what's sort of worth it, because I spent my money. I didn't get paid to do it. I spent my money.
That's exactly it.
The most like ultra filtered concentration of what actually matters. It's just a lot of like separating signal from noise is how I like to think about it, because I mean, I just think of Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok, the places where I would typically get my inspiration. It's either just so like abstract pie in the sky Pinterest of like, okay, general vibe and mood and celebrities wearing outfits. And then on Instagram and TikTok, it's kind of like, okay, am I getting a commission for this item for selling it? You know, like, am I getting it sent for free? So it's just like cutting through a lot of that noise was a huge part of why we built it in the first place. Just understanding the landscape right now and how saturated it is with incentivized reviews, fake reviews, etc.
Right. So that actually brings up the number one story of the Gen X question this week, which is the writer Mo Diggs, who is also a young Gen X, born in 1976, judging by his email account. That's right.
Wow.
I'm doing a little detective work.
Shout out to Mo and Mo's email.
Yeah, exactly. He subscribed to my newsletter, and so I found out what his newsletter is. Anyway, Mo wrote this piece asking whether it was the alt-apocalypse, as he called it, which is like, are these claims that have happened recently in particular, partially because of the decline of digital media and partially because of the hegemony of control taken by the Elon Musks of the world or the Larry Ellisons of the world or whatever it is around the potential fate of TikTok, you know, does it mean that alternative creators are not going to have much of a future? Mo is very skeptical about that assertion in the article and calls it to question in great length. But I just wonder, to what extent do you all look at Selleb as being a thing that empowers creators as opposed to just a reflection of, you know, social trend, or ultimately just like a cool place to hang out and with like minds?
I think the most unique aspect of the platform is that you're seeing a side of people that is not, well, first of all, typically not sort of viewable on any other platform. Like, you're not going to be posting your receipts on Instagram because it's just not a destination for that. But I think the most interesting part about it is that receipts don't lie, and it's essentially like a reflection of the things that you value. I mean, we vote with our pocketbooks. Like, the idea that you're spending money on something that tells you a lot about what that person's maybe taste is, or inclinations, or, you know, what they choose to put out into the world. And that is sort of lost on a lot of existing platforms today. And so, you know, it could be anything from, you know, people post like movie tickets, news subscriptions, coffee orders. Like, it could be literally anything with a price tag. And, you know, there is, of course, the argument that you're enabling a very consumerist, capitalist company. But at the end of the day, like, we do all buy things, and it's just a question of how do we want to package that to the world, and what does that say about us and what we value. So I think it's a very interesting sort of springboard for a larger conversation. And also, not to mention the fact that it is sort of like a lot of passive sharing. And what I love about that aspect, to just kind of double click on it, is the fact that everyone has receipts. They're all sitting in your inbox or in your jean pockets, as we like to say, if it's a paper receipt. But you have it, and it's content. It's just not being leveraged in any sort of which way as it exists.
I was going to say, too, to the point of like alt media and like that whole thing, like, I think it does sort of, you know, not that a brand is media. Well, increasingly they are, for better or worse. But like, I'm thinking, for example, when I did mine, like, it was a funny exercise because I don't buy a lot of things for myriad reasons. I used to be like a super shopper or whatever. And like, in reflecting on like the last 5 things, quote unquote, I found that everything was like a tool. Meaning that, like, I know if 1 or 2 of the items were like a book that I had bought for research for a book that I'm writing, and like those came from like a niche like German reseller, and like, I think the only new item, I could be wrong, I'm
Big
not
flex
remembering
there.
Yeah.
Hey, look, it's
flex.
hard to find. I actually have the book right here because it's trying to find something right, but like, it's hard to find like resellers in Europe, book resellers in Europe, especially in English. So, well, not in Spain, you can't find them, so I had to go to Germany.
Got it.
Anyway, but that, like, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I am the place that encourages me if I'm trying to put on my altruism hat here a little bit and think about as the parent of Gen Z kids be thinking about it, how a more sort of sustainable, responsible future happens. To a certain degree, it's kind of like the way that we would have to cure talking on mobile phones in cars. Like you'd have to shame people out of it because otherwise they won't do it. And to a certain extent, I think the way we get out of this, like more is more mentality to a fewer, better focus on more sustainable or more sort of craft-based purchases is to encourage those ones and to, cast doubt on the ones that are not as sustainable. Like, I don't know, when you see a Shein receipt, do they get downvoted on the app? Not to pick on Shein, you know what I mean? But like,
no, you can pick on Shein, not the person.
You
You
can
can
totally
pick on
pick
Shein.
okay.
Timu, Amazon, fair game.
I don't want the fellow kids to like, vote me out of the social circle or whatever.
No.
Okay.
We should vote them
in
out,
seriousness,
whatever.
I mean, how do you encourage that kind of responsible behavior commercially?
I think the first thing is like when we ask people to send receipts, we're like, okay, send receipts that actually represent who you are as kind of like a springboard for future submissions. And so people aren't thinking like, okay, like maybe there are people who are like Shein is a representation of me, but for the most part, it's like, okay, it's the really niche random things that are like so representative of that person. And so we're not really getting like a Fashion Nova haul, for example.
Totally. Well, I was going to say,
Which
like,
if you do
like,
send.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say, like, how often when you get things, are they like, someone giving like a caveat, meaning that like, oh, well, this is Amazon, but like, I don't usually shop at Amazon, or just like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's to the point of like showing a receipt is like, it can be damning in the sense that like, I do this embarrassing thing. So like, whether or not they actually share that or not is besides the point, but I feel like some people will be like, well, I did just buy that, and they just like totally just go in unedited and bless their soul. But
Totally. No, I love this. I think a lot of it's just, they are raw submissions. Like people lead, like a lot of our users, it's like they lead by example. And if they're seeing like one person post their vibrator, they're like, oh, like that's normalized now. Or like, oh, someone sends their rent every month. And I'm like, wow, pop off. And I feel like now other people will be sending in their rent because it's like, okay, like who cares? Like it's not that deep at the end of the day. Like I'll just share random things that are just funny or represent me or that are useful or, utilitarian, whatever that may be. It really does cover the whole spectrum.
Yeah, it is. I have to say, this is such a fitting topic for a show about intergenerational conversation because I am so uncomfortable, which is why it's taken me such a long time to get receipts to you guys. Like I am so uncomfortable with the notion of sharing that stuff because to me the things seem so either like frivolous or so not damning exactly, but just like I don't.
Can you give us an example? Because like I find this fascinating because like it took me a bit to get back to y'all and like to get it going, but I was like, well, what is the receipt that I send? But like I didn't go to the point that you got to of like, oh, you know what I mean? So I'm so curious, like what's an example?
Well,
of that?
I mean, so as a for instance, one of the things that I spend a bunch of money on every week is breakfast at this breakfast club that I host on Wednesdays. And the reason is because I pay the bill and then everybody else Venmos me for the money. So I have this $400 receipt every Wednesday for breakfast. and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I should post that because there should be a way to talk about what Breakfast Club is. And then I'm like, but I don't want people to think I'm spending $400 on breakfast or eating 90
You're
plates
qualifying
of pancakes.
it.
Well, that's my point, Kyle. It's like I was raised with the thought that like we don't talk about money because it's impolite to talk about money. And this is a generational divide, I think, that
it's funny that you say that because like one of the items that I bought was like it was a bit lavish and not, and I don't remember how I explained it, but like I bought a like $200 alarm clock. And like
I'm obsessed with it. I have it too.
Oh, you have it? Is it a Dieter Rams or something?
No. It's like this like smart. Well, it's a Europe problem. I've been emailing with them, and I'm like, is it gone? Has it left? Because like it's been 2 months.
It's not a Lofty, is it?
It is a Lofty. Oh wow.
Yeah. Ours are Lofty fan.
We're Lofty.
Are you a Lofty hater?
I'm married to a Lofty fan. Let's say.
Oh, see.
You can benefit.
But I shared because again, like to the point of like tools and stuff. I was like this year. After like a few years of failing of like no phone in bedroom, like this year I was like, this is it. And like ironically now it hasn't shown up and I just use my like Apple Watch to wake me up. And the only reason I bought it is because it could wake me up. It was just so fucking dumb. Like I could have bought a $2 one, but I was like, or just my Apple Watch, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to invest in this. I'm never going to get another clock for the rest of my life.
Kyle, I think
if it shows up.
I think this is actually a perfect point to go to, because I want to hear what Chloe and Claire have to say about your submissions this week. If we're talking about like millennial indulgences, let's call it. Kyle Gordon had a big week, or is having a big week with his, what is it, a millennial fight song? Is that?
It's just like a millennial. I didn't actually know the name of it. I know that it starts "We Are Young." That's all I remember of the words. But like, I think it's just like a millennial parody earworm that is in Kyle Gordon's TikTok style that now is having a TikTok moment to parody or defend or critique millennial culture.
So, Chloe, Claire, are you familiar with this?
Yeah, the song, but I didn't know that it was Kyle Gordon. Like, I'd never heard of him before.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but did you know the Planet of the Bass song?
No.
Okay, so like 2 summers ago. Yeah, 2 summers ago.
I think it was just last summer, actually.
Was it last summer?
I think it was last summer.
Either way, it was like the Planet of the Bass song. Seriously. This fake like Euro trance song where it was like, you know, the iconic lyric "Woman is my favorite guy." Like, it was a really ridiculous dance song that Sabrina Breyer was like the video girl in one of them. He did a few of them. It was a blip. Maybe this is all saying that like Kyle Gordon is really millennial core. Anyway, so he has this millennial song now. It's blowing up on TikTok. Maybe it's just millennial TikTok, and that is concerning me and my outcome.
Well, no, Chloe said you heard it though, Chloe, right?
No, I've heard this song, but it's not really in my For You page, but I've heard the song.
Okay, because I prior to the links being circulated for this conversation, I had never heard it. I know I was familiar with Kyle Gordon because of the Planet of the Bass song, but I actually thought that this was a different song in which he does a really piss poor take on UK garage. But anyway, I found this song. I was playing it out loud, and my daughter, who is 15, was just like, "No, not that song. Oh my God, not that song." And so clearly it has occupied her life and popular imagination in a very specific way, which I was stunned by. How long ago did you come across it?
It was pretty recently, and it had to do with just like cringe millennial things. But like, that's kind of the basis of what I knew. And it was just like, LOL, like that millennial doing that, especially like in relation to restaurants, like the restaurant core. And then everyone kind of took it in different directions that were like nail salon, but make it, you know, Kyle Gordon style TikTok memes.
You know about this?
Yeah, I have seen these.
Okay. Because new to me, but go ahead, Kyle. Where did you?
I was just gonna say, like, this is blowing my mind because like TikTok feels like the good thing about TikTok is that it feels like you are the star of like the audience, and like, oh, everybody else is watching this too, and like clearly, I mean, obviously that's not true, but like,
no,
I know that song is big, but like, it's blowing my mind that like it's specific to millennials. Ironic that it's a song about millennials. But like, that makes so much sense. But it's also like, I think what's funny about it is like, you know, hypothetically, Chloe, in your timeline, it's like, yeah, that cringe thing millennials do, whatever. But then like, Ben, for your daughter, it's like, oh God, my friend's parents, like, it's like that. Like, it's so, I mean, funny. Because for me, it's I lived through that. Okay, cool. Anyway, moving on.
It really is. Well, I don't know. I think the thing that has sparked so much attention for it, by my estimation, is just that it provides a platform for critique that ever like omnipresent. Like, we're going to critique restaurants, we're going to critique hotels, we're going to critique tattoos. My daughter showed me a tattoo one in response to this whole thing. It gives everybody a way to react to the big social memes that have happened over the last 30 years because of the largest generational cohort in history, aka millennials. But you're really in your bag this week, Kyle, which I like.
I mean, look, hey, so I feel like millennials are constantly like beaten up, and like we're finally getting our like redemption era in a way. And I think that this song sort of, look, let's say like 2019, if this would have come out, it would have been like, I don't know, it would have been like a drive-by shooting every day from like Gen Z. Because I remember that. I remember like, because at the time I worked at Nickelodeon.
Okay.
And like, just constantly like watching TikTok and doing research online about like Gen Z and like kids, because like we were making shows for kids and like teens, tweens, whatever, and just like constantly getting dogged on. And me and my coworkers were like, damn, they're so mean to us. And then like now I think like the kids that we were sort of making shows for, and this was, 6 years ago, a lot of them are probably in college or getting out of college, and they're probably like, yeah, we were like we went too hard on them. Like, wow, they like, I understand what they were going through. Not fully yet, but like
no one is
funny.
saying that.
No
Hey,
one's safe. Honestly, now they're coming after old Gen Z, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask was, I mean, one of the things we talked about on the pilot episode was that every generation, and certainly my experience has been that every generation feels villainized and vilified at some point, and then has a redemption arc, or at the very least has a normalization arc and comes back to normal. Like this, I wonder whether people that are younger than you guys are going to look at in this sort of living in public behavior that Selleb is built on in a certain respect and go, I could never. Or alternately, whether they will learn it as a modus operandi going forward, and it will just be the
that to me is a little shocking, because like Gen A is like, they are the most unhinged. Like they will post anything online. Like I'm trying to think of like something that is like PG to say that they would post, that you wouldn't post, but like they are the most rotted.
Okay, I'm going to stop you because this is a show about
scary,
Gen X, Y, and Z. But okay,
it's true. They are
the toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my god.
I
just feel bad. I feel bad for the poor Gen Bs, Gen Betas, who are already starting off from a disadvantage of the generation.
Oh yeah, that's brutal.
There's going to be a rebranding. There's going to be
rebranding
for the
Gen Beta, just as a name. Like, I'm sorry.
I'm kind of obsessed with it. It's like they're going to be the new millennials. I'm rooting for them.
They're going to be the alpha. Really.
I am not sure about that. All right. Well, speaking of those kind of attitudes and stuff, one of the things, Skibbity Toilet and Riz, God, I can't believe I just said that. Sorry, guys.
Congrats.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll need to keep like a Skibbity Toilet
like
Riz counter on the show.
The floor above me right now.
True.
What I was going to say though is that one of the speaking of the sort of the Gen Z section of stories, one of the stories that you put forward was this New York Times piece over the weekend about there being too many trends and Gen Z folks complaining about there being too many trends and then naming all of the things. Shark boots. I was not aware of shark boots until over the weekend. But
Me either.
There you go. What was it about that story that you said, we need to talk about this?
I think the biggest thing is just like on TikTok, it kind of started with all the cores. Like I remember seeing this maybe a year ago where it was cottage core, like baby doll core, like strawberry core. Like it was just coring everything. And that kind of just started. And then it started splintering into smaller niches. And then people were like latching on to certain trends. And then there was just this whole, I guess, a flurry of people trying to like buy things associated with the trends, and then people jumping on the bandwagon off and on like of all these different trends and then buying things associated with it. And it kind of does spill into every other vertical. It's not even just like Gen Z trends, but I do think it's like splintered off into like movies. It's like, oh, everyone's getting super niche in every single vertical. And this was just kind of this representation of how Gen Z is seeing this on TikTok. And I just found it interesting because it's like, other generations do it too for, other types of niches and verticals, but ours just happens to be about a lot of products and, naming certain things and jumping on that bandwagon. And so I kind of wanted to, ask more about like how you guys and your generation see the splintering of different niches, like in maybe different kinds of verticals, and like how that affects your day-to-day consumption.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, let me start, Kyle, and throw to you. What I am struck by as you talk there is the idea of the core namification, essentially like the branding of the behavior or the object as the first impulse, right? It's not even like we're going to do the thing. It's like, I'm going to name it and then I'm going to do it. And that to me probably comes out of this, 2 decades of social media where the personal brand gets put forward front and center, and then gets manifested or gets shifted or changed. But I hadn't really thought of it as being the reason that you would name a thing before doing it until just now.
To
What do
me,
you say, Kyle?
me, what's interesting is that, like, obviously, and I think that everybody sort of feels this, there's sort of like product, content, media fatigue. Like, there's just too much of everything now. There's so much, and it's like, it's overwhelming. But I think, like, if we're thinking generationally, it feels that, like, you know, truly this is a trickle down, because like the boomers, like, they were very like, I only buy my Betty Crocker. I'm making that up. Just like, that's all I buy. This one brand, like, this is my thing. Like Gen X got a little bit more open. Millennials, I think, like, a big part of what we say brought to the culture was, like, you know, these more startup-y food concept. Let's say we're using the Betty Crocker example, that's taking it a bit more niche to that. And then, like, now there is just so much of the niches of the niches. And I think the difference is that, like, as each generation has gone through, there's been more, or there's been less and less sort of like, I don't need that. Like, I think to the point that Gen Z is like, I have to get it all to participate, when you don't. And I think that that's what sort of has created this fatigue, is that it's like, it's a spending of the money, it's a having the too much things, it's a you can't keep up with the pace, and it burns you out. And like, that's why sort of like, I feel like I have this conversation every few months, is that like the trend cycle has effectively collapsed, because it exhausted the people who create the trends. They don't have time to make trends now. They just only say yes, and that's not a trend, that's just buying.
It reminds me a little bit of what growing up in subcultures was like in the 1980s and 1990s. If you weren't fully into a subculture, you were not allowed to participate. So you couldn't hop from one to the other. I couldn't be a skateboarder today and a coastal grandma tomorrow and a basketball player the next day. Like, just out of the question. And so you rather than focusing on the breadth, as I think Kyle is talking about, and becoming overwhelmed or exhausted by it, trying to keep up, you're just like, no, I'm going to just drill in and get the things that I am attached to or identified with really right or really good. Now that creates its own set of problems, because it's exclusionary, because it's unimaginative to a certain degree, and it can be kind of a trap. But I suspect that's probably what's at the heart of a lot of it.
I also think it's interesting that I've heard people talk about the fact that the younger generation, it's like no one goes through an awkward phase, because it's kind of just like everyone copies what they see on TikTok. They latch on to some persona or an identity for a short period of time. And then they're like, okay, like on to the next. And so they never really experienced the awkwardness of like not knowing who you are and like experimenting. They kind of just pull on things that are already existing in the ecosystem and then just saying like, okay, that's me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like, it will inspire, hopefully, the, you know, make a authentic decision yourself challenge, because it's true. It's just like, oh, well, the small screen that I hold in my hand told me to do this, so I'm going to do it. And it's like, well, no, you're autonomous. You have free will, dummy. Like, fucking pick your own food. You don't have to eat the pickle that everybody's eating right now.
That pickle was prepared in my house by our series producer, and I will tell you that was a disgusting phenomenon. Terrible. So, Chloe, Claire, you guys also talked about the idea around the Gen Z budget, and how this is a story also in the New York Times about how concert tickets had inflated in value a lot, and it was killing the budget of young people, which I will say is not just true of young people. Concert tickets, these entertainment experiences, are incredibly expensive relative to even what they were years ago, adjusted for inflation. Does that sort of turn you off, or does it make the things more special?
That it's more expensive, or that?
Yeah.
I personally, I mean, I think Chloe can speak more to this, but I think there's definitely more of a premium on experiences just post-COVID, and people wanting to find a sense of belonging and community, and people will pay up for that without a doubt. But sure. I personally think that if it's outside of a certain range, I'm just like, all right, screw it, it's not happening. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to preference. Like, I'd rather spend that money on a really nice dinner than a concert. So it just, I think it is just boils down to the individual, but I know Chloe had a really interesting thought here.
I think just seeing that article in the context of Selleb made me very, I don't know, like, I was like, this makes so much sense because I've been seeing so many submissions lately that are like, oh, $600 on a Bad Bunny experience. And I was like, oh, wow, like people are buying these things and people will go into debt for it. And it'll also be not even for Bad Bunny. It'll be for like the nichest singer songwriter that I'm like, I've never heard of them before. And they're going to spend, almost $1,000 on that kind of experience because they're like, this is what I value. And so I think going back to experiences and like spending money on things that go beyond, the tangible has been something that we've been seeing a lot of on Celeb, especially from some of our younger users. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, like this is definitely like in line with what I'm seeing just from like a, consumer spending perspective.
Sure. Kyle, you were going to
well,
chime in there, it looked like.
I mean, there was a lot in that is just fascinating. It was like, well, is this actually a Bad Bunny concert or just a quote unquote Bad Bunny experience that you like walk through, which would be fucking wild if you spent that money and didn't actually see Benito, but that's just me. But I think like this, to me, what this gets at is like to the too many trends things. I think a lot of this gets at is like, not to be old man for a moment, but let me be old person for a moment. Okay, so younger person, in between person for a moment. Is like there is this like, again, that sort of lack of free will thing sort of gets to this idea of like peer pressure still running amok, like when you should know better. I think like Claire, that was a really good point of like, I'd rather spend that on dinner. Like I would do that too. And I think a lot of people would, but I think a lot of people, to the point of this article, and I've met these people and I know a lot of them exist. I see them on TikTok too. And I have them in my personal life. They'll fly another country for a show that they've seen 3 times already. And it's like, it's just this sort of like peer pressure of like, well, all the other Swifties or whatever are doing, so I'm going to do it too. And it's like, why? Like, you already like genuflected at the house of Beyonce. You don't have to do it again. She doesn't give a shit. She's squeezing you dry for money. And it's like, you can't pay your rent now because you thought you wanted to go see her in Paris? Okay, dummy, that's on you. Like, I don't have any sympathy. That's me. That's very
I'm with
rude,
you.
but...
And our 19-year-old engineer was like, yeah, like, it's just not a choice. I'm like, is it? He's like, I just have to pay it. It's 500. Like, there's no other option. And I'm like, you could just not go.
So it's cultural rent then, basically. It's experiential or generational rent. Interesting. That's a concept that we need to explore, I think, a little further. One thing that I wanted to also quickly touch on, because I thought it was fascinating that you raised it, was the idea of how different generations use ChatGPT, or let's call them large language models. I prefer Perplexity.
Me too.
Okay, good. All right. Finally, something we can agree upon. But what was the question there, or what was the thought that you were motivated by?
So, right, we both have a lot of thoughts on this. I think especially as it really, okay, so I could come at this from many different vectors, but okay, from a student perspective. So I went back to school last year, and ChatGPT was sort of, it wasn't in its nascency, but it had picked up some steam, and academic standards did not catch up to GPT. So school really did become a joke, and I saw everyone and everything could be GPT'd and you could get a good grade from it. So that's basically how I juggled Celeb in school. And that's just a whole different conversation. Uh-huh. But I think what Chloe and I were, really talking about when we put GPT in the topics list is that I think there's just, I don't know if this is just a Gen Z thing, but I think it's really brought into the forefront, like how appalled I am at how people just don't like screen things, or they just have the audacity to leave GPT untouched and unedited. Like, we'll get resume submissions all the time, and in the description it's like, I would advise her to do XYZ thing. It's like talking in the third person. I'm like, do people just, are they so already overly dependent and reliant on AI that they're not even double checking their work? Like, it's baffling to me as a starting point. If Chloe, you want to build on that.
No, we were talking about this in the context of just like cold emails of people being like, oh, I'm interested in like working with Celeb or, being a part of the team. And then it'll be like, you can see like there are certain GPT things that everyone knows. It's like the double star thing that is on everything. If you copy paste it, it has like 2 asterisks. And so I'll see that in some of the body of the emails and I'm like, oh, okay, like this entire thing was GPT'd. Or it's like, if there's bullet points and every single thing is capitalized, like every word is capitalized, I'm like, okay, like this person didn't even bother changing the title or refining it or anything. And there are just certain, I guess, signals where I'm like, okay, like people just aren't reading things again or making sure that it sounds like their voice. So everything ends up sounding the same. And there are a lot of word choices that you're like, oh, like they use the word mosaic again. Like that is a very GPT-esque word type. Tapestry too.
Tapestry. Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm unaware of these subtle signals.
I think
Tapestries
because
and
I used
mosaic.
it for school so much, my antenna are up like this. I can
Yeah,
recognize
yeah, for
anything
sure.
BT'd, and it's quite baffling sometimes. Just the audacity.
Well, I will say this. I think there's a lot of concern of people in my age who are, have reached a level of success, have built up a level of quality of life which is very comfortable and would be very hard to leave, and also is hard to pay for if you don't have economic power. And they look at ChatGPT or just the LLMs, AI in general, and just go, this is going to allow somebody who is not as experienced as me to leapfrog me or to make me obsolete, or this is going to just end up doing my job entirely, right? And I don't think either of those things are actually true, because what it comes down to ultimately is the way in which these tools get used. But I will say the gospel of people my age is basically like, learn to use this shit well, or you're going to get replaced by somebody who knows how to use it well. And so that would be my generational take on it. Kyle, where are you at in the whole?
I am very staunchly anti-AI.
Just anti.
It's less because of the I think as a writer, I think to the points of exactly what you said, Claire and Chloe, I think that it dissolve again, to the point of exactly what we talked about of not having the free will, not having your sense of self, it really dissolves that. You then are sort of a void, your written self is you. And I think about this a lot, even having, living in Spain and having Google translate my writing into Spanish. I don't do that because Google then is speaking for me. It's not me. So I want there to be the errors. I want people to know this isn't this is my first language and I'm learning. And so that sort of levels the playing field. And I think when you lose that and rely on things, you're misrepresenting yourself. I've definitely hired people in the past who misrepresented themselves, perhaps from AI or not, on a resume, and it was a disaster. It was bad. And they would let them go because they weren't who they said they were. But beyond that, to me, it was look, there's such an energy problem and water problem, all these things. I'm not going to dump out a bottle of water just to sort of come up with some log lines for a booze brand I'm working on. That is ridiculous.
Well,
I will use it maybe. I will
use
it maybe once a month.
Fascinating equivocation. Yeah.
But it's true. It's sure. Using these things is just I'm wasting a resource that I'd rather drink that water than just dump it on the ground, or I'd rather people in other country be able to drink it in their drought world, sadly. But it's
well, yeah, obviously
that's what I think about a lot. But I'm also, again, I'm a writer, so it's it's not that it's sensitive to me and that I think that I'm going to be killed by AI. I don't think so at all. I think there's going to be a division of people who use it and people who don't, and that's fine. I think again, it comes down to taste. It's going to come down to expertise, and I think a lot of people are going to get, as many people are getting left behind as will be advanced. That's my take on it. I don't know if that's millennial or not, but that's my take.
No, I see it. Well, listen, don't worry about the robots. You can get a robot insurance now.
Fabulous.
Sorry, that was the dad joke of the segment, guys. Chloe, Claire, what's next for you with Selleb and with Gen Z as a way to sort of bring us home?
Who's gonna talk? Just as it relates to the broader mission, or just kind of where our heads are at?
I think where your heads are at. We live in fraught times, and just knowing sort of you have a very clear, starting point and a trajectory that may be changing dynamically, or may seem more laser focused than ever.
Yeah, I think the way that we think about the future of Selleb is really, how can we build the biggest sort of search engine in the world powered by the most verifiable human real inputs? And so, yeah, like we discussed before with all the platforms and the splintering and sort of the fracturing into different fiefdoms, I think, and also the trend cycles and just how those are, it's the boom and the bust. I think for us, it's just kind of along the lines of how can we be, I don't like overusing the word taste because it's one of those words that is just becoming community.
I love it. It's true.
It's becoming what?
Community.
The word community.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
It really does get the point across, but it is a bit of an eye-rolly word, which is frustrating because taste is really at the heart and crux of Selleb. I think what's really hard nowadays, at least in the world of products and finding things and becoming inspired and discovering, is just that it's just, you don't really know who to trust anymore, where to look. There are a lot of just pieces of content out there that aren't really grounded in anything real, or doesn't feel like you have a full picture. So for us, I think Celeb really will be that tuning fork for taste. And as it relates to search, it's like, okay, if I search for, I don't know, I want to learn about a Bath and Body, I know that's a bad example, like a Summer Fridays lip balm, a lot of the girls are buying. Like, what are they actually thinking about this versus what are my favorite influencers peddling? And then also on the discovery side of things, it's kind of like, as I said before, the Pinterest and the, you know, Instagrams of the world and TikToks, it's kind of like there isn't real inspiration that's backed by something that you can trust. And so a large part of what we're building with our Celeb feed is just like, I can scroll through and everything that I see, every piece of content is backed by proof of purchase and receipt. And so there's real beauty in that. And so it's kind of like the duality of search and discovery, and sort of fine tuning both of those and making it a very trustworthy place for those types of people to kind of come to.
Yeah. I mean, a tuning fork for authentic taste and real purchase decisions is,
Put that in a tote bag.
Not a bad idea. We are trying to build out our merch.
We have ideas. All right. Well, listen, Chloe, Claire, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and Kyle, as always. Thank you for joining us as guests on the first episode of Hip Replacement. We hope to have you back at some point soon down the road, and to see how the journey goes. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of other generational truths to uncover. So we hope everybody tuning in comes back next week, and beyond that, we hope that you head over to Celeb to look for Kyle's receipts. Look out for mine; they're coming soon, I promise. And just generally speaking, Chloe, Claire, we hope to see you guys around soon.
Thanks for having us.
It's been so much
Thanks
fun.
for coming, yo.
Of course.
A lot of fun.
Bye.